So ladies, gentlemen, fellow 11th Street kids, welcome to my Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 3 recap, review, and breakdown. So today's episode picked up the pace quite a bit when compared to the first two episodes, as we're now pretty much diving fully into this other dimension. We have Argus stepping up their plan to investigate the dimensional discrepancy, and we had a couple of old faces pop up, and much more. So without wasting any more time, ladies and gentlemen, if you're brand new here and you like Peacemaker, I'm sure you do, but also just DC across the board, you are absolutely in the right place. Consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this, and of course, if you go on to enjoy the video, help your boy out by leaving a like. And I've heard there's a new hype feature, so if you like the video, I think that opens up this kind of hype thing maybe, or so I've heard. I would really appreciate that, because apparently that launches me out there even more. And of course, don't forget to leave your thoughts on this episode and just your general theories about what could happen next. So first up with episode 3, just like episode 2, we begin with a flashback. And when I first saw this, it put a big smile on my face, because we dive 3 years into the past where we see Harcourt getting out of bed and she's with Joel Kinnaman's Rick Flag Jr. So there is so much that I really appreciate about this. I mean, first of all, I'm quite a big fan of Joel Kinnaman, whether that's his previous work in the DCEU. I think years ago as well, he was like pretty damn incredible in Altered Carbon on Netflix. And then, you know, I'm sure many of you have seen this. If not, what are you doing? He has a fantastic role in Apple TV's For All Mankind. So it's safe to say that even though we've been speculating that Peacemaker Season 2 may contain a flashback with Rick Flag Jr. in some way, shape, or form, just given, you know, Rick Flag Sr.'s large role this season, it still had me very pumped actually seeing on screen. And I speak about Rick Flag Sr.'s larger role this season, but he hasn't really, well, he wasn't in this episode, and he was barely in last episode. So, you know, I'm sure we will be seeing him very, very soon with the way this episode ended. Now, the next thing I just appreciated about this scene was that it gave a history to Harcourt that I just didn't really see coming, but it's a connection that absolutely works. So they have a thing together, you could say, 3 years ago, and Harcourt mentions that he ships out today to Corto Maltese in just 2 hours' time, which when watching this scene is also a really sad thing to hear, because this would be the last time that she ever saw him, as Corto Maltese is obviously where the events of James Gunn's The Suicide Squad took place. And since he ships out today, Harcourt says that he should really be with June, but Flag says that she's a fecking sorceress, and he's afraid if he actually breaks up with her that she'll burrow a hole in the planet. So right here we have Enchantress maintained as canon from the DCEU. This might not be a mega shocking thing, but it's still cool, and I still appreciate it. And we know that Rick Flag had a little something with her in the past, but it's apparent by this point that he's not really invested in the relationship. I mean, as we can tell, he's literally cheating on her, but he's scared to break up with her because, you know, well, I can actually imagine that would be kind of scary. But this is when he says that maybe a hole through the planet is worth it for Harcourt and him to just be a thing. And he's serious, but Harcourt is kind of brushing it off in a kind of Harcourt way. It's not like she's not super interested, but I feel like her character was just kind of parking that conversation for another time, perhaps down the road, where she may have just entertained it more upon his return. But that time never came, because, as the episode likes to remind us of here, in a series of quick flashes, we see him die in the events of the Suicide Squad. And it's like, why? Why do you have to keep reminding me of what we lost? But back to Harcourt here. I mean, I'd love to know your thoughts on this, but for me, it certainly enriches her character even more with just this context of the past, because, you know, if you're to cast your mind back to Peacemaker Season 1, being forced to work with Peacemaker under the orders of Amanda Waller on Project Butterfly, she likely had pretty conflicted feelings about that, because sure, like, knowing Peacemaker did have orders, but at the end of the day, that's hard to appreciate when she knew Flag Jr. personally. I mean, just ask Rick Flag Sr. about that one. And, you know, eventually, as the events of the past couple of years continue, you then just go on to grow a connection to the man who killed what she calls the only friend she had at the time and could have gone on to be a legitimate love interest for her. Now, knowing all of that kind of cuts deep, if you ask me. But continuing on here, after the intro, we're back with Peacemaker in the other dimension. And because of him drinking his pain away, because of Harcourt and the way she kind of treated him at the end of last episode, he sleeps past 11, and we get Keith asking where he's been. And he's also asking what the blood in the library was all about. And again, we know that was because of the battle with the other Peacemaker. This is when we learn, after the events of last episode, that they exchanged a few more texts with one another, where he actually asked to see her, and Emilia is all cautious about it because of her history with this other dimension's Chris, but ultimately agrees to see him at work at noon, which is just a few minutes away. So we see him dive into the other Peacemaker's closet, where he has quite a bit of a different fashion sense, and even mentions to Keith that all the clothes look like the Kardashians' furniture, and Keith has no idea who the Kardashians are, so they either don't exist in this dimension, or rather, maybe more likely, they never got famous. So all of this behavior is certainly raising an eyebrow for Keith and Augie, their dad, especially when, in this moment, he does a surprise pop quiz asking if he can name the entire address and zip code for Emilia Harcourt's workplace. And in this moment, he learns that he has a peace cycle. And oh man, this thing looks badass. So you can see it's all rigged up with what looks to be like these missiles, gun barrels, freaking rocket-sized exhausts, and even some bloody speakers on it. It's like fully decked out in a way that Chris could only dream of. The soundtrack kicking in at this moment was fantastic. Like, obviously, when it comes to Peacemaker, I have zero complaints there. He puts on the motorcycle helmet, which is, of course, a Peacemaker helmet, and he sets off to Argus HQ. And again, the peace cycle on the road looks so freaking cool. And as he rides through town, he just realizes how well known this other Peacemaker was, as the people absolutely adore him left, right, and center. And so we have Peacemaker arrive at Argus here, and once again, he needs to try and blend in as best as he can, but he has a little surprise around every corner, such as the guy at the front desk being very familiar with him, even asking how Mr. Grant's test turned out, with him responding instantly, yeah, very positive, which is very terrible because he was hoping it wasn't cancer. Now, who is Mr. Grant? Initially, I was thinking, like, is this Augie's, like, neighbor? You know, because there was that old guy neighbor in season 1, even though the houses are a bit different in these dimensions, and maybe he tested positive for cancer, I don't know. But then, if it's not him, because I don't think we know that guy's name. I mean, I've tried looking it up, and the only other DC character in my head right now that I can think of with the last name Grant would be Ted Grant. That is Wildcat. So maybe I'm really overthinking this, and I probably am, but maybe in this other dimension, Peacemaker's worked with Wildcat, but he's gotten cancer. I just feel like maybe I'm being silly. This is where we go back to the 11th Street kids the morning after their reunion, and Adebayo wakes up with a stinking hangover. And in these scenes, she pokes even more into Harcourt and Chris just hanging out a lot a couple of weeks ago, wondering if something happened between both of them, and as usual, she denies it. And so does Vigilante, by the way, because, of course, Peacemaker is his very best friend, and they share everything with each other. Here we learn more about his fascination with animals and just insects like spiders that he feels is a deep, dark secret that people may judge him for, but doesn't seem to remotely understand why the amount of people that he's killed would, come across as more off-putting than his passion for animal facts. Now, also, it turns out that Economos passed out in the bathtub, and Harcourt wants Vigilante to go away, so she pretends to be concerned that he maybe choked on his own sick, which leads to Vigilante rushing into the bathroom and waking up Economos by putting his freaking hands down his throat. Like, that was one of my favorite parts of the episode, because it was all off screen, and you could just imagine, like, him rushing in there, and just Economos wakes up to that. Again, that kind of comedy where you don't see it, but you imagine it, and you just hear the sounds. Yeah.
Jesus Christ, dude!
Now, Adebayo doesn't want to seem to give up here because she pokes even more into Harcourt and Peacemaker on the roof, mentioning how Peacemaker said to her that Harcourt ghosted him. And once again, she denies that anything happened between them. She goes on to say how he's in love with her, but she says it's just not a thing. It will never be a thing. But a thing is, does he know that? So all of these scenes are really just leaning more and more into, one of the core reasons as to why Peacemaker has left. Not to make it sound like it's the sole reason as to why he's left. Obviously, the first couple of episodes to this episode have made it clear that there are other things. But I like how the very scenes that parallel these ones in the episode are of us seeing how Peacemaker's priority right now is going to see Harcourt, or Emilia Harcourt, shall we just say, in the other world. Whereas in this dimension, you can just see how Harcourt's trying to make Peacemaker seem all messed up. That's similar to what she said to him at the end of last episode, saying he wears a feckin' clown costume, which is when, and I'm glad Adebayo calls Harcourt out for not having a balanced life, and if anything, saying that she's a train wreck. Now, obviously, Harcourt has got a lot of things to straighten out in her life, and she deflects a whole bunch here, but it's very evident under the tough exterior that she can see exactly what Adebayo is saying, and it kind of just speaks to a much larger truth that she chooses to ignore. And up next, guys, one of my favorite parts of the episode. Oh man, we have Peacemaker enter the Argus office and he spots Emilia Harcourt, which is when we see who the jarhead was that Keith was referencing. And of course, as many of you had guessed anyway, that is none other than Rick Flag Jr. Now, this instantly haunts Chris because obviously this must be incredibly dark for him to see the man he killed and kind of regrets killing just standing there asking him what's up. I would also love to know your thoughts on this because I liked how Flag Jr. was wearing this shirt that is similar to the look and color that we had for Rick Flag Sr. in Creature Commandos. Now, obviously, it's not the exact same, but I feel like it's got to be a little bit of a nod to that, even if it is Flag Jr. from another dimension. Now, the awkward thing about this is just how insecure Rick Flag Sr. is about Chris turning up to the office because, I mean, after all, he's in a relationship with Emilia and he feels threatened by their pretty, solid past that they've had with all those photos that we've seen. And I guess, you can't blame the guy at all because, I mean, think about it. If your girlfriend's ex just rocked up to the office because, let's just say you work together, and she goes off with him for the afternoon, and you knew they were kind of serious, then yeah, you can imagine how he's feeling here. And I have to state the obvious, though. It just feels so good having Joel Kinnaman back for more than just the flashback in the intro, because I wonder, and let me know down in the comments if you thought that the flashback we saw in the intro, did you think like that was the extent of what we would see? It was a nice little cameo, but no, there's more here. And I know it's not exactly the same as seeing the Flag Jr. that we're familiar with, but I just like how they worked to find a way to utilize Rick Flag Jr. in another dimension in this way. Now, Emilia finds it weird that he calls her by her first name. Obviously, there's some things that our Peacemaker is slipping up on or things that he just doesn't know about. And I have to admit, it is such simple humor, but Joel Kinnaman was just so freaking hilarious with him constantly kind of peeping to see what they're doing. Like this shot here where Peacemaker just instinctively looks over because he knows he's hugging this guy's girl, and you just see that little head pop up over the cubicle staring him down, looking absolutely furious, and you just see it like lowering to then, I don't know, running over and taking cover and spying on them even more. We learn in this moment as well that Flag in this dimension was in the army and not the Marines. Now, this is when Economos, this is where, honestly, for me, the humor really just kept stepping up in the episode. He gets a call from Sacha Bordeaux demanding to know why Economos didn't tell them that Peacemaker has some kind of superpowered duck, because Fleury informed Sacha Bordeaux about what he describes as a meta duck, as in metahuman duck. Now, Economos immediately shuts this down and says it's just a regular eagle, but I guess Sasha was willing to believe Fleury initially about it potentially being a metahuman duck, because Eagerly did take down 5 Argus agents. One's in the ICU, she said. Another lost an eye, as we very evidently saw. And another needs frickin' reconstructive facial surgery. So, Flurry saying there's a meta duck. She might have been like, there's weirder things in the DCU. But either way, the bird blindness jokes are still going strong, and I love them. For me, I think the bloody fantastic thing about having Tim Meadows on this show is that there's a certain way he just delivers his lines, like, so seriously. It's not like the character is trying to set up a gag. It's like, no, his comedy is always in how he delivers it.
Duck?
A meta duck.
With such sincerity. Do you know what I mean? I know that's a common way of doing comedy, but Tim Meadows just has a certain demeanor where the way, I know I keep saying the way he delivers it, but it just is so freaking hilarious, man. And yeah, he's one of my favorite characters of this season already. But back with Emilia and Peacemaker, like, you can instantly tell how, despite being with Rick Flag Jr., this Harcourt still has very strong feelings for Peacemaker. We get to see them wander around town, past the top trio mural where we have Blue Dragon, Captain Triumph, and of course Peacemaker. We also see that billboard for the Mighty Crabjoys, which we know from Superman. Clark is a huge fan of them. And of course, there's just other little bits and pieces like Jitter's Coffee in town. I don't really regard these as Easter eggs. I have been really keeping an eye out for like little bits and pieces, but it's not like a huge amount. It's like little things like that, unless I have missed some, but I feel like I did look quite a bit. But let me know if you spotted something, of course. But overall, they seem to be having a really great time together. And this Harcourt is the complete opposite of the Harcourt that Peacemaker knows, as this one seems to have it really together. Not that our Harcourt can't one day be like that, but, it's all sunshine, rainbows, and literally, hugging puppies in slow motion kind of thing. It's very picture perfect. So when it really comes down to it, they talk about what's going on with Rick Flag, and Emilia mentions that he's not really gonna mess around on her, just implying that the other Peacemaker cheated on her, which has actually been hinted at, I think, in previous episodes. So she's very hesitant because she doesn't want her heart broken again, and they kind of get to a point where it looks like they basically are going to give it another go, which is weird saying it that way because our Peacemaker has never given it a go with her, but, you get what I'm saying, which is when, let's get to the meat of this. All of a sudden, the Sons of Liberty set off an explosion, albeit I think it was accidentally because the explosive material they're using is very sensitive, so it wasn't exactly intentional. And we learn that the sensitive explosives are made out of cafanolol, which is certainly a word. Cafanolol. Say that 5 times in a row. Cafanolol. Now, the Sons of Liberty say that they're united in fighting their oppressors, with their mission being to destroy one government agency a week until all of their demands are met. Now, the Sons of Liberty are a direct reference from the Sons of Liberty from the comics. I believe they first appeared in a Superman comic in the 90s, and you probably guessed it, just like Peacemaker, they were a secret American kind of super extremist, patriotic organization that wanted to overthrow the way things were being done in the US, and that this is kind of, I guess, a version of that in this other dimension. So they could exist in the main DCU dimension as well. It would be pretty cool if we saw Superman apprehend them just like he did in the comic, as more of like a throwaway thing, I don't know, like at the start of Man of Tomorrow, the next James Gunn thing that was announced only yesterday. Check out my news roundup video if you haven't seen that already, but like, it's the little day in the life of Superman thing, like the kaiju, he just flies in and sorts them out. But anyway, to get back on track, this leads Chris to take matters into his own hands and save the day from the Sons, and he heads to the roof of the pet store, and he literally jumps through to the other building. Now, I would have loved to have seen this in like the new Peacemaker suit. As the cop also points out, he wasn't wearing it, and they were like, what the hell? But it's almost more badass, which is probably why they pointed that out in the episode, because he can single-handedly take them all down without the suit. And oh man, does this get pretty savage here. I probably can barely show any of this, but he instantly takes out the first guy with the axe. He then proceeds to use the other guy's own knife against him, stabbing him through the eye. And then we see the photocopier being used to absolutely crush the other one. And then we have like a little stealth moment where he's hanging from the ceiling and he completely wrecks that dude with 2 pencils in each ear. And it's like, I feel like I felt that. So since the Sons realize they're doomed unless they get out of there, they get like a bloody chopper as evac for their getaway, and Peacemaker finishes the rest of them off, and he kind of has to try and defuse the bombs from going off, which, you know, was aided by a lot of luck, so this was a very convenient moment, as he had no idea if it would work or not, but it did. Now, this is where Keith comes in as Captain Triumph of the top trio in his Captain Triumph suit and demolishes the chopper by flying right through it. I remember seeing that shot from the trailers, and his landing with the jetpack was pretty sweet as well. Literally, in this moment, what more could he want? He's got his brother, he's a superhero duo with his brother, he's got his lady over here rushing to him, he's got the people cheering him on as a superhero. Now, Economos heads over to Sasha, I believe at the hospital, and the other Argus agents, and they seem to think, and I kind of felt bad for Economos here. I mean, he kind of has warned them a little bit, but they think he tipped off Chris because of the whole meta duck situation. But we just know Eagly is there all the time, and that's what he says. And they even threatened his future at Argus, even though they didn't inform him about the break-in on Chris's house because they kept him out the loop. Now, Fleury is insistent that Economos told him it was a duck, and I think this was one of my other favorite lines of this episode, where he literally is accusing Economos of making a practical joke and using his own disability against him.
But you almost got titties killed.
Either way, Argus and Sacha Bordeaux are full steam ahead when it comes to this dimensional discrepancy that was detected, because after the Metropolis incident that took out half the city, threats like this, as she says, are Argus' top priority. So now they're sending every available agent to Peacemaker's house, and because of the meta-duck, our beloved Eagly, they've even brought in Michael Rooker's Red Saint Wild to assist, who is the world's foremost eagle hunter. And let me just say, things get pretty entertaining from here on out with the little, arch nemesis thing for Eagly there that we're going to see. They want to try and take Peacemaker in alive, and understandably this makes Economos pretty worried. And they also mention what Adebayo said previously to Peacemaker, that if he is in possession of a dimensional portal, that alone is probably enough to put him in prison again for life. Bordeaux then introduces Economos to his new partner, Agent Rip Jagger, and your boy, Judomaster, has returned. And I'm very happy about that because there's just something about Judomaster, even though Economos is very unhappy about this.
Hey, fatty.
Now, this is when we're back with Peacemaker, and things seem to be going very well with Harcourt after today's events, and he lets her know that he's got to take care of some business, so we'll be away for a little while he returns to the, I guess we could call it, main dimension. And I really loved this ending of the episode because we once again have Keith double check if he's good, like mentioning how Dad is worried as he's been disappearing a bit more than usual, and Chris reassures him. And obviously, this just makes sense because they can tell something is off. No matter how much he's trying to blend in, you are still having quite a bit of a different demeanor compared to the other Peacemaker. But this scene, once again, really brings life to the more personal story that we've got this year for Peacemaker. When Keith says that he loves him no matter what, and how he's his brother and always will be. And then we get that moment where Chris says that he really misses him more than he could ever know, I guess he was going to finish off by saying. And Keith says he's not going anywhere, and he's never going anywhere. Every time, I'm telling you, there's moments like this, I get like the freaking flashbacks to those pivotal moments of season 1's flashbacks to their childhood where Keith died because of Augie making his own kids beat each other and like seeing who would win. And it's just, really messed up Peacemaker trauma there. And I know overall, I guess in conclusion here, that the first couple of episodes pacing has been slow for some people. And while I agree with that, I've still really enjoyed all the episodes so far regardless, simply because the story is still really rich as it continues to tell the inner struggle our Peacemaker is facing. And even more so now that he, in this episode, more than any other episode we've had so far of the three, has the opportunity to live out the life he's always dreamed of. And as I said in last week's review, perhaps they should have dropped the first 2 episodes at once and then gone weekly from there on out, as I do feel like this episode moved things forward more so than the others. But that's still not like an inherent critique of the show for me, or on the first 2 episodes, because the story is what the story is. Like, it needed to take the time to set up where Peacemaker was at the beginning of the season and what he discovers through the QUC, and now in episode 3 adding just more into the inner conflict and struggle of whether he should leave to stay in the new dimension, as he's laid down even more roots with his relationship with Emilia Harcourt, the way the world sees him as this awesome superhero, which is something he desires, obviously. You know, I just feel like the ball is really rolling now for season 2. Maybe people would have liked that a bit sooner, but again, I guess that's more subjective. I don't think that really makes the episodes bad. The only kind of remedy for that personally is what I keep saying. Maybe they should have dropped the first 2 episodes, or maybe at a stretch the first 3, because sometimes you do have some streaming services drop 2 or 3 episodes at once and then it's weekly from there on out. But the episode ends off at what I think is a great place, because we now have a ton of Argus agents arriving at Peacemaker's house, you know, along with Bordeaux, Fleury, Economos, Judomaster, and Red Saint Wild, just ready to finally get to the bottom of the dimensional discrepancy. And don't forget, this is right as Peacemaker is heading back through the QUC, which really isn't good timing, to say the least, which to me, you know, sets up a perfect teeing off point for the beginning of episode 4. But I think that is everything I've got to say about episode 3, guys. As you can tell, still very much so enjoying myself, but now I'm going to turn it around on you. What did you think of Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 3? What are your thoughts on what I had to say about this episode compared to the first couple of episodes? Do you identify any issues there with the pacing, or do you kind of agree with me that while they may have been a bit more slower paced, it's still, you know, the story is what it is, and it's, you know, growing up to a stronger point, but it first had to lay down those foundations? But do you find episode 3 stronger in general? And are you looking forward to see where things go? Do you have any theories about where things could go? Let me know down in the comments below. Consider leaving a like / a hype on this video, and also consider subscribing for more videos just like this. Don't forget to check out my whopping big news roundup that I posted the video before this if you want a recent dose on DC Studios news. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow 11th Street kids in the next video. Goodbye.